Good morning and welcome to our council meeting for the 4th of May, another month gone. So to open our meeting this morning, welcome Jane McGavin from the Hub Church, if you'd like to come and join us and open our meeting.
Thank you very much. Morning to Mayor, Deputy Mayor and elected members. It's really a privilege to be here and thank you for allowing us to continue to be part of opening your council meetings. Tihei mauri ora, ko whareti te maunga, ko pohangana te awa, ko Bolton te waka, ko tangata tiriti te iwi, no Ashurst aho, ko Hub Church Fielding, tōku whare karakia. I always want to say karakai. We do that too. Karakia. Ko Jan tōku ingoa. Let me just open in prayer. Father, we welcome you here and we thank you for this place, our council for the Manawatu district. We thank you for these elected members, for their time, for their focus, for their commitment. Standing up and taking responsibility in different areas of our district and making it work, Lord, getting things done. And I pray for unity in this group and in this room, Lord, that there will be robust conversation, there will be differences of opinion, there will be perspectives and preferences, but I just pray for kindness and grace and willingness to do this together in unity, Lord. I thank you for your wisdom. And I pray that for each one here and those that are not here, Lord, the staff that support and make decisions happen that come out of this room. We just pray for your wisdom as they continue in their role and for the activities and ideas and agenda items that come up today. Yeah, give them stamina. Amen. Looks like it's going to be a long day looking at that agenda. All the best for that. So I'm Jan. I'm from the Hub Church here in Fielding. We're just a small little congregation, but we're doing life together and we're enjoying that. I've been the team leader at there since 2019. So chucked in the deep end with COVID arriving only a few months later, but we come from Ashurst, Bulls, Martin, all sorts of places. Fielding's a real place of rural gatherings, as you know. We're doing life and supporting one another. And my main focus as the leader and the leader of our kaitiaki, we have a small group of 4 of us together that put things together and support the people there, and then that goes out to their families and children and we're doing all right. I think things are going really well. I meet with the Christian Leaders Association once a month and they're a really great team, real good support for one another there.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Thank you so much for putting time in to come and open our meeting today, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you. All the best for your day.
So apologies today. Councillor Quigley is on approved leave and Councillor Short, welcome, is on Zoom with us today. So no requests for leave of absence, so we can go straight to item 4, confirmation of minutes. We're on page 6. There is a recommendation. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Ford.
I wish by move that the minutes of the council meeting held 20th of April 2023 be adopted as a true and correct record.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Underwood, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5, declarations of interest. Are there any items on our agenda today that members wish to declare?
It's disappointing.
Thank you. So we have no public forum, no presentations, no notification of late items or recommendations from committees or minutes from other committees. As you know, they go to our District Development Committee now. So we can go straight to item 11, the officers' report. We're on page 13. This is the Manawatu Community Trust loan funding. And for returning councillors, you'll remember that we approved funding of $1.4 million to come from year 4 of our 10-year plan. The request has come from the trust to bring this forward to help them in the progress that they are making developing their housing program. So I hand it over to Amanda. Welcome.
Good morning.
Thanks, Amanda. We've got the report there. We'll take it as read, but if there's anything else you just want to highlight for us. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you. I was just trying to find it on my laptop, so yay, I'll just use Lynn's one. I think it's pretty self-explanatory for new councillors. Obviously, you've met MCT. They've come and presented a couple of times. They're our one of our CCOs that we appoint. The reason why we borrow on their behalf and pass on is that we get really good interest rates compared to what they can do. And so therefore their money is being spent on better things than interest, I suppose you could say. The Local Government Act is quite clear that we cannot borrow and pass on at a cheaper rate than we receive. And so we always just add a slight margin to make sure that we're meeting that. We have a range of loans to them already. I've listed them in the report. Yeah, happy to take any questions. If we bring this forward, it makes no real difference to us because we were projecting to do that next year. So it just helps them get underway with the work that they're looking at doing.
Thanks, Amanda. Let's open it up for questions or comment. Councillor Ford.
Thanks, Amanda. I totally support this, but I'm just wanting to query 8.2 on page 16. Where it says when on lending to a CCO, council will be adding 1% to the lending rate to meet the section 63 requirements. Now I take it that's a full percentage as opposed to 1% of whatever the interest rate is. And you said a slight margin. Mm-hmm. So in terms of recent years when we've had really low interest rates, say we had 3%, 1% would be 33%, which is not small. So what will they be paying? So
you're doing more math than I think we probably need. So if we're getting it from LGFA at 4.3, we'll be charging them 5.3. So that's how that works. We've always done that as a markup. Anything, to be fair, they kind of range between 1.5 and 1 in the past. What we've also done in the past is we've agreed a interest rate upfront at what that loan was. And then as time goes on, when we roll them over, can't think what that's called right now, when we roll them over, they often are at a different rate. And so what we've agreed for them to pay is quite different to often what that individual line is that we're paying for LGFA. So I've had that chat with MCT around that because sometimes we would actually be paying more and that's the risk. Other times we'd be paying less. So what we've agreed is that we will actually have a conversation with them and our Bancorp Treasury Advisor and say, this is the 1.4 that they're wanting, that they're needing. What is your recommendation around terms and interest rates? And that's really kind of more agreed between them. They might come back and say, actually, we're going to take the 2-year interest rate, even though our loan's over 15, we'll take the 2-year. When it comes up for renewal, they'll make another call after that, and they'll be paying exactly that rate that we're getting, if that makes sense.
Yep. So the 1% is pretty standard.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Look, I had a bit of a same sort of question, and when I read 8.1, as unfamiliar as I am with section 63, it says section 63 of the Local Government Act states that council is not able to lend money to a CCO at more favourable terms than the council would receive. Mm-hmm. That indicates to me that we could actually lend to to the trust at the same rate that we receive?
We could, but that wouldn't be covering any of the administration costs that we also incur. So we have the bench, we have to do a whole lot of auditing and compliance fees around when we have debt. So we're actually passing a little bit of that cost on. But if you're not comfortable with 1%, we can make it 0.5.
Look, to be fair, I
one's
obviously
consistent.
misunderstood your comment around council actually meeting the requirements of section 63
Okay.
that we had to bang a margin on. So
No,
perhaps
we
I
don't.
misunderstood
We
that.
don't have to bang a margin on, but we're not to pass it over at a cheaper rate. And when we take into account the cost of our borrowing, it's more than just the interest rate.
That's clarified it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
Of the 5 loans that are listed there, only the first one is secured.
Yes.
So I'm thinking with the others being unsecured, that in general, anywhere else you would go, the interest rate would be more to reflect that. But I'm concerned about what happens if there were defaulting on these unsecured loans. Is this one unsecured as well, the 1.4 that we're talking about now?
It would be. Bear in mind that I'm pretty sure we have 100% control of this organisation via who we elect. They report to you regularly, I want to say 6 monthly, and their financials are open for us to see. If there was any stage that you were concerned, you have all the power in the world to step in and do something around this. So although it's unsecured, you have the control. The cost of securing it is often part of the problem. You know, it's making another cost.
It's just my concern is if they did default and they were in circumstances unable to do anything about it, then the ratepayer is...
Potentially, the ratepayer could need to pick it up. But as the controllers, no, that's not the word, but as the CCO strong owners, I suppose you could say, you could actually step in, appoint somebody else, or give them quite firm direction on how you'd want that managed.
Before
They
it got,
have
before it got
assets.
desperate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just one other question. In point 3.2, if we declined the funding, we would wait until the 1st of July this year.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It would be a few
months away.
exactly. It would be a few months down the track.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't know any kind of specifics that they want this money for. It's kind of like explained in 2.5, but it's all kind of like about ideas and opportunities, but nothing specific.
Yes. So when they presented to the LTP, and bear in mind that was quite a long time ago, and they asked for funding on particular, they had a work program of what they're building and progressing. In between times, they come to report to you 6 monthly, and they talk about what their aspirations are. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what they're about to build, develop, and whatever. But this is part of their overall work program that they've come and talked to you about through the statement of intent. So I haven't really gone and got the specifics because I felt that there was heaps of information out there. Lynn may have more, but
I just can't remember off the top of my
yeah.
head, sorry.
no.
But you know, they had presented it to us and spoken with council about what they continue to use that money for.
Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Your Worship. I deem this to be very low risk, support it, and I also think that it is well administered and well run as a trust from what I've seen. So as I said, I support it going to be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. My understanding when they last reported to us, they were about to start work on a block of 10 in something or other court here in Federal.
Yep, that's correct. Councillors, all this is they're asking for the money 2 months earlier than what we would have given it to.
Yeah, correct.
You've actually already approved the loan. You approved the loan through your long-term planning process. So all they're saying is, can we have the money now rather than July? That's all this is about.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I'm happy to move that council approve the bringing forward of $1.4 million of loan funding from 2023-24, year 4 of the 10-year plan, 2021 to 2031, to 2022 to 2023 financial year, to be on lent to Manawatu Community Trust.
Thank you. We have a mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Belsky. No further discussion. Councillor Quarry.
Thank you, Your Worship. How does this relate to our balance sheet? Is that an addition to our long-term debt as such, or is it a neutral effect in that it's in one drawer and out the other?
If you look at your balance sheet overall, it's neutral effects because we have investment in, I'm not even sure if it's listed as investment or a loan, but we've got the outwards liability with LGFA and we have the inwards of MCT. So it's actually neutral, but when we look at our loan cap as a whole, it is part of our loan cap. So it is one of the things that keeps us up there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing further. Motion's been passed and seconded, moved and seconded. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. We move to 11.2 emergency works claims. These are for the 2 cyclones that unfortunately our district has experienced, and seeking to approve the budget to pay for the cost of the repair work, which is also supported by Waka Kotahi. Welcome, John and Hamish.
Good morning. Good morning.
Thank you. There is a good report there. Take that as read, but welcome to highlight anything for us.
Yes, thank you, Worship. It's a bit of a moving target because Waka Kotahi is trying to balance its books so we get nickel and dimed over every claim that we put in. So 6.2, that should read, given the severity of the cyclone, hail and Gabriel events, it is possible that Waka Kotahi could approve a normal FAR plus 40, but they're still thinking about that for hail. The rest of it is correct. That's what happened. But there's a number of councils, including ourselves, who are debating that with Waka Kotahi, and we're trying to get that extra 20%. But we shall see.
So what you're saying is that potentially the figure that we're looking to approve for our share could be higher.
What you're going to approve is correct at the time, but if we can get another 20%, it'll be lower. But
Thank you.
we have to watch that space.
Thank you. Right, let's open it up for questions, comments. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, it appears, especially in regard to Gabriel, they've been pretty generous. So we haven't had 40% premium on other cyclones, have we?
No, we haven't. It's a sliding scale. So up to like 10% of your maintenance budget, they'll give you 52.
Right.
And then beyond that, they'll give 20%.
Yeah.
But if it's a severe event, they'll go up to 40%.
Okay.
They're even talking about, in some cases, probably Hawke's Bay, that they'll go up to 100%. But it all depends who you talk to, Waka Kotahi. So yeah, it's a moving target.
Yeah.
But that's correct at time of going to press. If there are any changes, we can appraise council of those with a subsequent paper.
And I think the term generous is probably more the necessity in terms of that increased funding. Typically, it is like getting blood out of a stone, but recognising the scale of the event, they're fairly realistic about that. So that's good.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? Because obviously Gabriel was a pretty expensive event from our point of view, and even with 92%, still costing us nearly $700,000, which is pretty hefty on our budget.
Not bad for a night's work.
It's significant. Even the 691 is a significant spend for us.
Yes.
So while we're very grateful for, I think we should be grateful for the support from central government on this, but acknowledge that it's still an expensive exercise.
Certainly is, but if it all pans out, we get 3 new bridges paid for at 92% subsidy.
Yeah.
So I've requested an offer of service from consultants to design. We've already built Koniwa, with Bosch Engineering, but the other 2 we'll have to have designs, and we're going to try and get that done as quickly as possible while the window of opportunity is open, because we don't want to drag the chain and then Wakako Taki says, well, so much of an emergency now, the fire reduces, so time is of the essence.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
I just wish to clarify, John. Going back to 6.2. Yeah. So it's, if I've got it right, 92% has been approved for Gabriel, and they're still talking about what the figure might be for Hale. Is that
No.
correct? No.
The original message was everything would get the 40%, 90, the 92%. But then they backpedaled and they give us 72% for Hale. But we're continuing to debate that with them, and we might, if we're lucky, get it back up to 40%. So yeah, it would have been better if I hadn't put 6.2 in the top. So you could remove that and renumber them, or you could add those words.
Thank you. Any further, Councillor Blackmore?
Thank you. So just following that point then, if we didn't see 6.2, how accurate then is the table 6.5?
That is the claim is that what's in there, and Hale has been approved. We're still waiting on Gabriel.
Okay, so there's no risk we would be up for more as a council, but an opportunity that we would be less.
Yes, at what we know at the moment, but until we design the bridges,
okay,
we don't know how much they're going to cost.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Short.
Thank you. John, the Bailey Bridge that we're leasing at Makiki from Wakakotahi, how much is that costing us per month, and for how long do you envisage that we will be leasing it for?
I don't know. I'd have to find out how much the lease costs is, but it's all part of that claim. And we will try and get a bridge replacement as fast as possible. As I say, we have to get it designed, and then we have to put it out to tender and construct it. So
the lease cost is built into the subsidy. Is that what you're saying?
yes.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Quarry.
Thank you. The long-term viability of our roading budget is a concern, in that I guess it needs to be reviewed during our long-term plan deliberations and the rating system for our roading. It concerns me we're spending a lot of money and borrowing it and not replacing it.
I'm not sure there was a question in there, but you're quite right in terms of the statement. It is a budget. It's a significant budget for council, and it is under pressure. As John's outlined, NZTA are always looking at opportunities to reduce their budget and therefore their funding and co-funding for works that we do. It will be an LTP discussion around that level of service. And I guess worst case for us would be a reduced level of funding that we're not happy with, and then a conversation as to what level of local share we might want to add into that within the NZTA sort of funding envelope. So it is a risk, well aware of, and I guess we have to follow our nose with it. So,
But NZTA's got the same problem because they're shareholders in this. So when we do that LTP, we can put all the submissions and improvements that people would like, but I'm picking that NZTA will fund them. They've already, there's rumours that they won't be funding any bridge improvements the next 3 years. They've taken it upon and said, well, the bridges will last. They can catch up with that. And I pick in that they will scrutinise all the pavement rehabs, and they will only give us the improvements that for their Road to Zero program. So anything else we put up, I'm doubtful whether they'll approve it. Because they have to find, they've got to balance their own books.
Which will then trigger a conversation around this table as to whether, if NZTA are unwilling to fund, whether this council wants to 100% rate fund that, and that will be a conversation as part of those LTP deliberations.
I think it also highlights the need for us to really understand and submit to the regional transport plan, because the discussion, the draft that we've seen so far, there's not enough focus on maintenance of existing roads, and that's been raised by a number of mayors. And we need to just keep pushing that and debating it. We need to, if budgets are tight, we should be looking after what we currently have to keep it in as good a condition as possible, rather than adding and everything declining. Councillor Belsky.
Yeah, thank you, John. I knew, or you all knew this was coming to us because of the cost of repairs. But I think you've had a lot of feedback from the backcountry on value for dollar, and the shifting of these slips has been eye-watering and unsustainable as far as I can see. So far, we're spared of rain up the north from this cyclone, which is very fortunate, but we certainly need to relook at things. But we're in a rock and a hard place. This will have to be approved because we've got to keep our roading system. It is under pressure, as you say, but I think we need to have a real relook at all this in the next Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ford.
So I'm happy to recommend, but just before I do, I just want to triple check. So if we approve the recommendations today, that's the worst scenario, and it could be better if we get another 20%.
It could be better if we can get that other 20% on the cyclone hail.
Yep, got it.
But pessimistic, it could be more if those bridges cost more.
Okay.
It's just an estimate.
All right, well, I move one, that council approves an increase in roading operational budget of $2,572,154, noting that $2,238,272.48 will be funded by Waka Kotahi, and the balance of $333,881.52 will be funded by Council Resilience Reserve. And two, that council approves an increase in roading capital renewal budget by $6,713,947, noting that $6,176,831.24 will be funded by Waka Kotahi, and the balance of $537,115.76 will be funded by Council Renewal Reserve.
Thank you. Have a mover, have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Belsky. Any further discussion? I'll put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motions are carried.
Pay this month's bill.
Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you. But I also want to commend the team for the work that has gone on in the valley. And, I've been up there a couple of times now to see, and having the local contractor, especially on the Kaniwa Bridge, having McIntyre's local, they knew the people. They were, I watched them interacting with the locals, and they were just helping keep the calm and people understanding what was going on. So that's to be commended.
Nice fly for that house.
Yes, thank you. Right, so we will delay 11.3 until 9:30 when our visitor will be here. So we'll go to 11.4. We're on page 26. This is our Lagoima report for the last month. Good morning, Mel and Francis. Thank you. So this is our Lagoima request for the last month there in the report, and welcome to speak to it.
Cool, thank you. We had a relatively quiet month compared to the months previous and compared to the months that we're working through at the moment. So just a few kind of requests that were on the go and completed over that month, some really large requests, some with a lot of correspondence and information, emails and things like that. So while we didn't have very many, they were relatively time consuming in terms of the redacting and the kind of double checking and things like that that we need to do. But I'm happy to just take any questions if there's anything specific anyone would like to discuss.
Thank you. So are there any questions, comments on the Lagoima requests? Councillor Underwood.
Just wondering, it says with SME, what does SME stand for?
Subject matter expert. So that just means subject matter expert. So it just means it's with the person, the officer within council who will be responding.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? No. Thank you for that. So we have a recommendation on page 26. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Blackmore.
I move that the report detailing the requests for information received under the Local Government Official Information and Meeting Act 1987 from 18 March 2023 to 14 April 2023 be received.
Thank you. Have a seconder, please. Councillor McFadyen. Thank you. No further discussion. Put the motion. Councillor Underwood.
Sorry, if I could just say one other thing. You said some of those requests had a lot of work involved. Are there going to be any charges for those people? Are they that kind of weighty?
We did discuss charges for one of the requests, but we decided due to the nature of the request and the relationships after discussion with Shane and Kathy at the time, that we would not charge for that information.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, team. 11.5, and we're on page 34. This is the adoption of our fees and charges, which you will recall we went through in detail in a workshop. So now it comes to us to approve those for the next financial year. Welcome, Ash.
Thank you.
So you're welcome to take us through this.
Yeah, sure. So I've just put it up on the screen. You'll see there's a bit in yellow. There's really just a typographical amendment. It's very small, wasn't worth adjusting the paper and resending it out, but I've just added it into the recommendation. It's just to update the subheading for a couple of those items to include the word lodgement.
Okay, so the addition is the word lodgement.
Yeah, into those two bracketed subheadings. Aside from that, it's not much to add. Some of the fees and charges are subject to bill and some aren't if they're prescribed by legislation or other documents. And all of the fees and charges are included in this except for the development contributions, which will come to a later meeting. Yeah, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Open it up for questions, comments. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. Just curious, looking through the list, a lot of those charges are related to, kind of an hourly rate for people's time. Those shifts, do any of those relate to shifting wages or salary moves over the year?
Yeah, I believe some of them did, particularly around, actually, sorry, I'll withdraw that. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, my understanding, and if you want more detail, we would need to ask probably Carol Bokes. But my understanding would be in the regulatory space in particular, where it's an hourly rate, those will be affected by the staff salary movements over the last year.
Oh, Shane.
We've also had a increase in the contract fees from the city for the supply of building services. So we had to take that in consideration. There was about 120 grand. So.
Yeah. So just to clarify then, 6.1, the statement around most of the proposed fees have been increased by the rate of inflation. Yep. It's most but not all.
Yep.
Yep. Done.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Just a question around, some of these fees are based on actual costs of, the time involved to do the work. and I'm looking particularly at mainly the areas of resource consenting and planning. Most of the costs or the fees in here are fixed cost, which is from a customer perspective is preferable because you know exactly what the price is. When it's an open-ended charge, there's a risk that costs could get away and bills could get up pretty high. So I just wonder if there's any sort of controls on that. And I'm particularly thinking of where we use external contractors to do some of this work, because we do use external non-council staff for some of these things. And of course, the nature of a consultant is to extend a job for as long as possible to get as much money that they can. So I just wonder, perhaps the CE might want to comment on that.
So it's yes, it's a vexed issue around fixed fee versus hourly rates, and it's one that council's debated previously. And council some time ago, when we were discussing LTP levels of service, decided this was a user pays service, and that it wasn't right for ratepayers to subsidise somebody's building consent or resource consent. So we have moved to a lodgement fee and then a hourly rate. The other issue we have is that the quality of consents that we get are poor. We have high 50s and low 60s of consents returned because the information provided is poor. We have somewhere around 60% of building inspections failing. Now, I don't see when we go back to do a re-inspection that a ratepayer should carry that cost. It should be passed on to the contractor or whoever the job is. It's a difficult one. We actually do have quite a high funding split for building. I think it's 60-40, which I know councils that don't subsidise their building services at all by any rates, that has to be fully self-funding. So we're in quite a good position in terms of that. So we are quite generous with our funding split there.
Councillor Underwood.
The ones we saw before were the district planning fees and charges and the Food Act fees and charges. They're the only ones that went out for submissions. Are there any on that full list that are new this year, or are they all previous fees that have been just increased?
None of the areas are new. I couldn't say for certain that there are no new line items.
Thanks, Amanda.
So the usual process when we're adopting fees and charges is we would actually adopt the ones that you just saw recently first, which are, we would normally bring to you at this time the ones that you've just mentioned first, and they would be adopted early because it allows us to do our animal control invoicing, and it allows us to notify everybody up front. And then these ones would normally be adopted in about a fortnight when you do the annual plan. We've just brought them forward together. So just to kind of give it a little bit of concept of why you're doing this a bit earlier than normal for those standing councillors. The process of doing this, some of those regulatory fees that one of the councillors has asked about, a lot of them are set in legislation. So there is a range of fees that don't move by anything because they're actually in the Act or in whichever building code that a regulatory manager works within. And then there's the range that do move based on inflation. And then there's the section, and the one that comes to mind is the swimming pool. I don't think the library so much, but in the swimming pool, where the manager of that area looks at what they need to meet with their funding split, so the percentage that needs to come from user fees versus rates, and then looks and says, how can we do that? How many programs do we need to run? That kind of thing. How do we actually run the activity to cover its costs? So there are a few lines in the swimming pool that I do recall where they've changed the way that they charge. I can't recall exactly what they were, but they looked across at the neighbouring pools, and Lido is probably the one that comes to mind, and said, what do they charge? What programs do they run? That kind of thing. Because we need to be competitive, otherwise people will go elsewhere. So for some of the areas, and the pool does come to mind, there will be some slightly different charges than there were last year.
Thank you. Councillor Corr.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. There is a concern out there in regard to building inspection fees where the application is lodged. They come across a area that needs a further explanation, and rather than doing the whole permit and pointing out the omissions or the points that need further work at the initial stage, rather than correcting the first area that's an issue, and then sending it back to the applicant for further work. What's happening is that there could be 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 issues with a building permit, and when one issue is identified and sent back to be corrected, this is just adding delay when the whole number of issues that are in regard to the permit cannot be addressed at the same time, and say, here's your paper you've put forward. There are 3 issues that need to be addressed, and it allows the person that's applying for the permit to address those later issues as well. But it's creating a lot of delay by doing it issue by issue. And that is a concern out there.
Thank you. Shane.
The way we currently do it actually came from the industry, because we used to process the whole consent and then send out one RFI and then wait for a response. And actually that slowed everything down worse, because it was such a long time before we were able to process everything. So they asked us to be able to process it as we identified the issues, to give it to them so they could address it and then to carry on processing. Now, it's complicated by the fact that we don't do all the processing in-house. The structural engineering, the geotech and other things associated with consents are outsourced. So when you outsource something, you're at the mercy of those experts getting back to you, but we still carry on the processing. And by drip feeding the RFIs, the information's coming in, we're processing, information comes, we're processing, and then we do a catch up with those other at the end. So sometimes not desirable, but it's what they actually asked. It's what the industry asked. We had a developers meeting and we had a meeting with builders, and they said, we want the process to keep going. We don't want you to process it, send us a 5-page RFI and stop everything and wait for us to get all the information in. So we adapted to that.
Yeah, the concerns I had in regard to the construction of a new cowshed, and that individual points were brought forward, and rather than allowing the progress of the shed and the progress of the permit to continue, one point was identified. They went back to correct that. They refiled the application. Another point was identified. They went to correct that and refile the application. And all that does, they have a limited period of time to construct cowsheds. They have contractors that are signed up and ready to go. And all it's doing is delaying the process of getting on with it.
Yeah, I guess my response to that is, if the people who submit the applications, and most of it's usually around structural or something like that, actually got it right when they sent their documentation into us, we wouldn't have to go back to them. Yeah. And we get high percentages of inaccurate or information not supplied, and it's wrong.
Yeah, well, a lot of them aren't used to filing building permit applications. And if they had the list of all the points at the initial stage, they could work on some of the later points as well.
We offer a pre-lodgement service where they can come at any time, sit down with the building officer and discuss the project before they file. We do it all the time.
And that's something we should be encouraging when we're out talking in the community, to please come and engage with our team before you put your application in, so you can go through, and between the two of you, you're well aware of what is required and why. Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Campbell made, in my view, a very good point regarding the fixed fee versus hourly rate type option, and the risk for the applicant in terms of the hourly rate approach. Similarly, our Chief Executive gave, I thought, a very good explanation in response, and also reminded us of the split and the fact that the ratepayer is actually subsidising to some extent anyway. So I sort of accept all that, but I'd like to perhaps just suggest that we all remind ourselves of that we should be aspirational to be customer friendly, business friendly, And I think we got a really good example when we were just talking to Lagoima a few minutes ago with Mel. And she was asked whether we charged or not. And she said, well, we took into account the nature of the complaint and the relationship. So there's a little bit of discretion there, and we all nodded our heads in acceptance. And so while I'm not asking for any changes, I'm just suggesting that perhaps we all remind ourselves, including the people on the front line, and I think it would be a good aspiration for our council to be the most customer friendly and most business friendly council in New Zealand. So we just keep that sort of high level thinking. I think that might help help as well. But I do accept the explanation that was given.
Thank you, Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Just going back to Councillor Quarry's point about multiple infractions and the process of sending consents back. Does that reset the day timer, the timer of every time it goes back? You know, my understanding is council is required to respond within a certain number of days. So every time a consent goes back, does that reset the timer? So
it doesn't reset it, it suspends it. So there's a 20-day time frame for processing. If you send out an RFI on the 8th day, then it stops the clock until you get that information back in. But we don't stop, we keep going. And we still carry on processing the consent until we get to the point where we can't do it anymore because we're reliant on that information.
I just clarified that, thank you. And if I may just, excuse me, one other thing in terms of the comment the Mayor made and the Deputy Mayor around pre-engagement before submitting a consent application. Is there a charge for that, or is that something?
No.
So I think the point that the Mayor made is actually very relevant, and I think that's actually a point that probably a lot of people don't actually understand, and that actually may be the way forward in terms of actually reducing the number of errors that come forward if people partook of that service.
Thank you. Lynn.
Thank you, Worship. If councillors would like, we could take to workshop a explanation of how regulatory works, particularly in the building services space. If that's helpful.
I think that would be helpful because we're out there talking in the community, and if we understand it, it can help influence getting things done smarter and faster. That would be good. Councillor Underwood.
Just a comment that we had no experience with lodging building consents, but did take advantage of that pre-lodgement engagement, and it went through very smoothly without any problems. So yeah, definitely something worth using.
Thank you. Are there any further discussion comments? Councillor Bell.
Just a comment and touching on Michael, I agree with the aspirations of being customer friendly, but I think one of the things that we might want to add to that in our aspirations is making sure our prices are competitive. When I look at the services that we offer, particularly like the pools in the library, there's a very subtle difference. There's a 30-cent, 80-cent difference between our Palmerston North services. But particularly the library service in Palmerston North, they have a really good country membership fee. So to ensure that those that live rurally can access the library easily. And I just think those little nuances, those little details really matter because what the feedback that I get when it comes to the services and fielding, that it seems like it's catered just for fielding. We've got to ensure that the neighbouring communities feel that they can use the services here too. So just to add to the aspirations, making sure that our prices are competitive as well. And that will add to the 2 points that you brought up, Michael.
Thank you. Shane.
So just with that, Councillor, when it comes to the levels of service discussion through the LTP process, those are exactly the things that you will discuss because there's a cost in delivering a service, but you get to choose how that cost is allocated, whether it's rates funded, fees and charges funded, or we're able to fund it some other way. So we will go through that through a couple of workshops, and you'll be able to have those conversations and decide exactly on those things.
Just a question. Thank you, Shane. Would we be able to get analytics on sort of our customer use when it comes to our services? Oh, it's not really customers, but and then we can compare those with the other neighbouring communities and services and councils. Would we be able to have that?
Give us a list of what you might want. We'll see whether we've got that data or not. But if we've got it, sure. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. Lynn.
Thank you, Worship. In terms of the library, we do not charge for any across borders access to the Manawatu district libraries, whereas, as you all know, Palmerston North City Council do charge for access from other districts to their library services. So that is one way that actually we look at actually making sure that there's no financial barriers, and we are seeking the same approach from our PAMI colleagues to try and have the same for our residents.
As well as our rural library services that we go out to those communities.
And we pay $10,000 a year to PAMI Library for children to access their services for free.
Thank you. So if there's nothing further, can we go to the recommendation on page 34? Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Ford.
I'll move that the council approve the activity fees and charges for the financial year commencing 1 July 2023 and ending 30th of June 2024 as detailed in the attachment to this report.
Sorry, can I just ask that?
Use the
whether you would
one
like to consider
recommended
the-
on the screen, sorry. So let's try that one again.
Right. I move that the council approve the activity fees and charges with amendment for the financial year commencing 1 July 2023 and ending 30th of June 2024 as detailed in the attachment to this report. Amendments: 1, update the district planning fee heading non-notified application fees to read non-notification application lodgement fees, and 2, update the district planning fee heading subdivision application fees to read subdivision applications lodgement fees.
Thank you. So I have a mover. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hadfield, thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Ash. Thank you. Right, so we can go back to 11.3. Thank you. This is the, we're on page 21. This is the adoption of the annual report to the 30th of June 2022. Welcome, Debbie Pereira. Come and join us at the table with Amanda. So we have that report. We do also have a copy of the annual report. And I'll hand it over to you to highlight, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Again, by the way. So this is the annual report to the 30th of June 2022. So for the new councillors, this was before your time, obviously. For the standing councillors, this is all about you. Okay. So this is about our performance and both financially and our levels of service. And it all comes together into this one report. This is a report that tells back to our ratepayers in our community what it is we've done against our plan. Okay. Normally it would be adopted on the 31st or before the 31st of October. But due to the COVID issues, the last couple of years, the legislation was changed to allow us to adopt by the 31st of December. That extension of time has now been taken away. So this financial year has to be back in October. This year we didn't adopt within that time frame of the 31st of December. Combination of issues, as you recall. So the annual report comes through audit and risk, and then it comes through to council. At the time we brought it through September, I think it was. It's in the report. We had a couple of things outstanding. We had the revaluation of our infrastructure assets outstanding, because when we did the year-end assessment, the movement triggered and said this is actually quite significant. So we had to do the full-on reval actually one day earlier than normal. So that made a delay. We also had we had a measure outstanding around our drinking water standards where we needed to do an external peer review. I don't know if it's peer review, but external review. And that took time. So that pushed us over that timeline. And there's also staffing, resourcing issues across Audit New Zealand. So this is very much a joint timeframe got pushed out for multiple reasons. And so now we're here. And there's been a few changes from what you saw originally. Nothing, to be fair, nothing I was too worried about. Actually, I was kind of like, well, that's pretty cool. The financials changed by the revaluation amount, which we've talked about. We've talked about that for our annual planning process. The value of our assets went up, our depreciation went up, our balance sheet went up. So that stuff was what we were expecting to happen. And we had some tweaks of our landfill provision. So I was kind of quite happy about that, actually. Not a huge amount of changes. So that reflects quite well. So Debbie is our lead audit director. So I was going to hand over to her and unless you've got any questions about the financials or anything like that or process, I was just going to hand over to Debbie.
Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Amanda. On 3.3, 3.4, page 23, if I read it correctly, we have a change in the operating surplus from 12.8 million to 13.3 million. Is that correct?
Yep. From 12.8.
Right. And that's made up from 370,000 in the depreciation and 130,000 in the finance. So that's the 500,000 difference. That's, as I see it, is it correct? I'm just looking for confirmation that that's
correct. Yep. So the main changes are your movement around your finance costs and your depreciation. At the very bottom of your operating surplus, you've also got moves and revaluation, which is in your comprehensive review and expenditure report.
So I haven't got it in my head yet why the surplus has improved when I thought we were having to allow for more depreciation.
Because we get a gain on our assets. So that comes through as a gain, which is positive. So you've got your higher cost, but you've also got a gain, which comes through the bottom line. Go through the page. No, I'm trying to think of which page it's on. I'm scrolling. Probably going to miss a few. Where is it? I actually can't get to the page quick enough to find it. So at the top, you've got your depreciation goes up, you've got your interest going up, which gives you your main part of your profit and loss, comprehensive revenue and expenditure. But you also have a line around your gain or losses on assets or revaluation, and that was a gain because our assets value went up. So although the expense went up, the gain went up as well.
It says the depreciation decreased from 18.17 to 17.8 as a result of depreciation written back on revalued assets.
Oh, yep, yep. Now I can't find my page 21.
And I'm just struggling to understand how that might have happened when we've increased the value of our assets. How does depreciation reduce?
I'm moving a blank. Can you recall?
Yes. So the revaluation was as at 30 June 2022. So the depreciation is for the 1 July 2021 to 30 June 2022. So the new depreciation won't kick in until 1 July 2022. So while your revaluation's gone up, that will impact your depreciation for the 2023 annual report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
Probably related to that, the increase in value of property, plant and equipment in 3.4.2. 1.03 is that billion.
Oh, that's a pretty good typo from 814 million to 1.03 million.
No, that's the total. I think you picked up the total plant equipment figure off the balance sheet, which is 1.029. That's the total value of plant equipment.
Yeah, we have. I'll have to send you up and have a look and come back with the amendment to what that number's supposed to be. Can I double check this like 3 times? public transport equipment did go up. I brought a report through to workshop and outlined what went up by which ones, which was your 3 borders and your roading. So we have discussed that number, which I should have just pulled straight into this report.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, I was trying to recall that as well. But sorry, I should have investigated this before, but on page 95, the balance sheet, total value of property, plant and equipment is 1.029. Trying to work out if that's how many millions that is, but anyway, 1.029 versus a budget of 824. So there was, we that year we spent 200 million more than budget on capital works. I'm trying to recall what it was.
You're looking at the balance sheet?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not about whether we spent, it's the revaluation as well as the revenue got revalued. So definitely what we spent.
Yeah, no, that's right. I couldn't recall us spending 200 million on product, plant and equipment. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Is there anything, Debbie, you'd like to add?
You know, I just thought I'd add that I'm pleased to now be in a position to be able to issue the audit opinion. So as Amanda said, the accounts do have 2 parts to it, and my opinion has 2 parts. It's probably got 3 parts to it. One is the financial statements. The other is the non-financial, which is the, we call it the statement of service performance. And both of these are a report back against your 2021-31 LTP. So this is the first year reporting back against that. There are also a number of regulations and legal requirements that you are required to have in your report. And so I also include in the opinion over that as well. So in terms of the financials, we've got an unmodified audit opinion. And it's, as Amanda said, there's very few changes that came through the audit process. And I'm pleased to say that there's no unrecorded misstatements that we have to report back up to you. So everything we found has been changed. In terms of the non-financial performance, there are 2 performance measures that we couldn't put an opinion over. And these are the resource consents and the building consents. So as part of our testing, we found some differences between what was reported and what was in the underlying information. There was going to be a significant amount of work for staff to actually go back and reassess all of the underlying information to see if it was accurate. So therefore, we have included a limitation over those 2 performance measures because we don't have sufficient information to confirm or deny whether the numbers reported are correct. Council has reported that those 2 measures haven't been met anyway, and there's an explanation around that. So the relevance of going back to see whether those numbers were correct probably didn't warrant the time that it would take. So there's a note in my opinion that we couldn't give an opinion over those 2 performance measures. But the rest of the non-financial performance in the disclosures, the legislative requirements are we're happy with and give an unmodified opinion over those.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. We're very pleased to receive and finally approve the annual report, and it was a good result. It's somewhat disappointing it's so late because we've really missed now the opportunity to publicise, I think, what was a really good year for council in terms of what we achieved. In fact, the 6 years I've been on council, I think probably if you look through the results of what we did achieve that year, it was probably the best of any of those 6. There was some significant work done in terms of, which I highlighted in the report, road sealing of 56 kilometres, the playground at Kowai Park was built, the Orbiter bus service was put in, the Manawatu Bridge was built and completed and opened, significant work on wastewater centralisation, Resource Recovery Centre was built and opened, massive project. And we did some significant work on waste management. And then on top of that, from a financial point of view, we achieved an operating surplus of 3.2 million versus an 8.7 million, so better than budget. And we achieved 87.5% of our capital budget spend, which is probably the best since I've been on council as well. So it wasn't too bad a result. And then also we met most of our levels of service that we'd the KPIs. So if you take all that into account, it was a very, very good year. And if we'd been able to publish this and send some comms out to the community in October, it would have been a good news story. But now we've missed it. It's far too late. It's just not going to happen. So, yeah, very sad that opportunity is now gone. So hopefully the COVID era is now over. We'll be back to some normality. We'll be able to publish our annual report as normal in October and get the news out to the community of some of the good work we're doing.
Thank you. Just following on from that, Debbie, can you update us on going forward, like Councillor Campbell mentioned, due to workload and restraints and etc. Where does the audit sit now? Are we looking to get back on track time-wise?
Yes, yes, you are. So as Amanda had said previously, the statutory deadline has moved back to 31st of October. So while it went to 31st of December, and for the last couple of years, it has been quite a stretch to get to that point. The council's timeline is back on track, and we have also resourced up, and we have also had some audits reallocated just to take away some of the burden of having to have everyone at the same time. So we are in a good position to be able to get back on that time frame, the normal time frame. And also, of course, LTP is coming up as well, and that's crucial to have that adopted by the statutory deadline. So there is a lot of work, and probably you'll see a lot of myself and my team over the next few months, or next 9-10 months. Yeah.
Thank you. Really pleased to hear that. And given the points that Councillor Campbell's said, I still think, given that this is an agenda item today, I still think it's worth, seeing if our comms team can put something together around this. People aren't so worried about dates, but just the good news story and the list of the projects that we did, and then the financial position we were in at the end of the year, I think is worth celebrating. Councillor Underwood.
Just a question about the revenue on page 94. That statement says there's $12 million of other revenue, and then there's note 6, which directs us to page 113 and explains some of that other revenue. But at the end, there's still 1.8 million that's called other, which is still quite a significant amount. Is it because there's just so many little bits that have come in that it's not itemised further?
Yeah, we have so many lines of revenue lines, and some of them are so small, but by the time they accumulate up, they're worth them out. So you get a bit down to the materiality of how much you want to include on these statements. So yeah, it is about the amount of small things that you have to add up to.
But quite, from an interest point of view, it might be interesting to the ratepayers. I mean, I'm interested myself just to know where it all comes from, really.
Okay.
There's the fizz.
Yeah, I'm just thinking there's the fizz. So all of those accumulations, and I'm not on a different page number because I'm actually looking at the physical report. So I'm assuming that you're looking at the page.
The notes to the financial statements.
The financial sections, yeah. Those are a note that comes from the original consolidated FIS and funding impact statement. And each of the activities have a funding impact statement that consolidates down to those. So generally we go back to each of the activities and say, where did that revenue appear? And then as soon as you get there, you think, oh, that's what it's from. So flicking through, going back to.
Because I've got here user fees and charges, that's itemised, then shared service revenue, petrol tax, vested assets, and then gain or loss on disposal of property. But then the other revenue is 1.8 million.
Yeah. Look, I can send you a list of what that is. I don't have it on my lines. I can send you a list if you want to have a look.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. Just a question on the areas that were unable to be commented on in the audit. It's not really probably a question for you. It's maybe Lynn. Are we doing something to rectify that going forward? That won't be a gap? The areas that couldn't be commented on through the audit, if we're doing something about that going forward so that that's not a gap in the future?
Which areas?
I'll do it.
Okay, thank you.
So with regard to the levels of service around resource consents and building consents, yes. So what was picked up is the information that was being captured. It's in the files, but not being counted that easily. So at the time that was highlighted, the team set out about capturing it correctly going forward.
Yeah.
So absolutely, it's been dealt with.
So next time round would
should be perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Hadfield.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. Interestingly enough, I was actually going to two things. One, agree with Councillor Campbell's comments. I think he articulated those in a significantly erudite manner, and I think that's something that those of us that sat around here the last time would agree with. But I was actually going to commend audit pragmatism, which was actually the process you've just talked about, of actually not wasting staff time on something that actually didn't matter. And it'll come as no surprise to you that I think audit pragmatism is something that's actually exceptionally useful.
Thank you. Right, so if there's no further discussion or comments, we have a recommendation on page 21. Councillor Underwood.
Sorry, one's a question and one's a comment. Under the stormwater group, there looks to be a result that has not been achieved, but it's ambiguous as to whether it has been achieved or not. It's the first page of the stormwater group, point 1.
Image of it. Let me find a quick way of doing it.
And just a comment while you're looking, with the photos, there's some amazing photos in the report, and I was just wondering if it's possible to caption them, just so people who are reading know where that particular place is, especially if it's like scenery in that.
I'll pass it on to the design team. Yeah. To show that it is actually part of our review. I'm scrolling back a bit.
If I might just jump in about
Thank you, Frances.
the labelling of the photos, we probably wouldn't go back and do that retrospectively for the annual report, but I think it's a good idea for annual plans and long-term plan coming up.
Thanks.
Yeah, it is a good point.
So, Councillor, at this stormwater one, can you tell me which measure it is that you're referring to?
You can expect stormwater system adequacy, it's number 1. And then the second line, the number of habitable floors affected during each flooding event, and the target was less than 10. And the result was 4.78. And it says it's not achieved.
I'm seeing on your screen.
Yep.
See that? That's it, okay. So, okay, so that is an under 10 result, and it says the number of inhabitable floors affected during the flooding expressed as 1,000 properties connected to the council stormwater system. A flooding event is defined as an overflow of the urban stormwater. The result is 4.78, and it is listed as not complying. I don't know.
It looks like it has complied, yeah. Well, that's the way I read it.
Absolutely. Look, I will just double check that. I can find it my screen now. Just looked at it in yours.
So we do need to have a look at that one. It may be just a matter of interpretation.
Yeah, that's that one there. Well, I'll have a look. If the icon has been transposed, we'll definitely publish it.
Thank you. Thanks. Small point in the wrong place, maybe.
Seems odd.
47.8.
It's more than likely the graphic that's been dropped in there is the wrong one's been dropped in.
Thank you. Thank you for raising.
But we will look at that.
Councillor Campbell.
If there's no other comments, I'd be very happy to move that the council adopt the annual report for the year ended 30 June 2022.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Debbie. Okay, so there are no late items. So that takes us to item 13, which is our public excluded business. I'm happy to move that the public be excluded from the following parts of proceedings of this meeting, namely the confirmation of minutes and the appointments to the CEDA board. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ford. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you.